Australia wasn't caught off guard by a storm or a headline. It was overwhelmed by 60,000 Filipinos who packed their bags, booked flights, and told Melbourne, "We're coming." Airports were congested, roads were gridlocked, and hotels disappeared from booking apps overnight. And at the center of that powerful, breathing, unstoppable human wave stood a 20-year-old girl from Quezon City carrying the hopes of an entire archipelago on her shoulders. Tennis had witnessed passionate crowds before rowdy crowds, loud crowds, but nothing had prepared the world for what Filipino loyalty looked like when it finally arrived on the biggest stage. By the time the sun rose over Melbourne Park on January 19, 2026, the Australian Open had already been transformed into something it had never been in its entire 50-year history. Stay with us, because what followed didn't just shake a tennis tournament, it shook the entire sport. Every revolution needs a spark. For Philippine tennis, that spark had a name: Alexandra Eala. Born in Quezon City and trained in Mallorca at the Rafael Nadal Academy since the age of 13, Eala had spent years refining herself into something dangerous, disciplined, and inevitable. She wasn't shaped by a system, she was built through sacrifice. While others lived typical teenage lives, Eala was thousands of miles away from home, training on clay courts under the Spanish sun, learning at the same academy that developed one of the greatest champions the sport has ever seen. And the results came like thunder. In 2025, everything accelerated. At the Miami Open, Eala didn't just compete, she shattered expectations. She defeated world number 2 Iga Swiatek, a 5-time Grand Slam champion, in a performance that left broadcasters double-checking the scoreboard. She then overpowered Madison Keys and Jelena Ostapenko, 2 more Grand Slam champions in the same run. Let that sink in. A 20-year-old from the Philippines, ranked outside the top 80 at the time, eliminated 3 major champions in a single tournament. Then came the US Open. Eala stepped onto the court and made history, becoming the first Filipino player, male or female, to win a Grand Slam singles match. Decades of Philippine tennis had built toward that one victory. One match, one moment, one name. Rising from world number 136 to breaking into the top 50 by November, her climb was unlike anything the WTA Tour had seen in years. Mats Wilander, one of tennis's most respected voices, looked straight into the camera and said, "With Alexandra Eala, we're talking about someone with God-given hands." Tony Nadal, the man who developed Rafael Nadal, watched her play and quietly remarked, "Once she fully finds her game, she could be among the best in the world." These weren't casual compliments, they were declarations. As the highest-ranked player in Philippine history and one of the brightest stars among a new wave of Asian talent rising through the WTA rankings, immense attention had already begun building around her long before Melbourne. Back in the Philippines, an entire nation had practically stopped sleeping. Every match became an event. Every ranking update became national news. Grandparents who had never followed tennis were suddenly discussing tiebreaks and serve percentages. An 86-year-old Filipino fan captured the emotion perfectly, writing, "Alex is the only Filipino tennis player making global waves. She's the first to make our country proud. Her presence at the elite level will draw unimaginable crowds, even if she loses, because Filipinos are naturally supportive, especially on the international stage." Unimaginable crowd. Those 3 words would prove to be the most accurate prediction of the entire year. When the Australian Open draw was released and Alexandra Eala's name appeared in the main draw, not qualifying, not a wildcard, but a direct top 5-0 entry, the Philippines didn't just celebrate, it mobilized. And this is where the story stops being just about tennis and becomes something far more powerful. Picture Melbourne on a Sunday evening, trams moving through the streets, the Yarra River reflecting the fading sunlight. Locals heading home after day 1 of the Australian Open, already being called one of the biggest attendance days in tournament history, with over 100,000 people through the gates. Normal, familiar, predictable. Then Monday morning arrived and Melbourne looked completely different. Hours before the match, fans were already lining up outside an outer court. Some held Philippine flags, others refreshed their phones as security warned that capacity would be limited. These weren't just early arrivals, they had traveled across oceans. Flights came in from Manila, Cebu, Davao, with connecting routes through Singapore, Dubai, and Sydney. Filipino communities from across Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, Perth converged on Melbourne like a rising tide pulled by something deeply cultural and unifying. The Filipino diaspora in Australia, one of the country's largest and most close-knit immigrant communities, had essentially turned January 19th into a national holiday. The line to see Alexandra Eala stretched endlessly through Melbourne Park, extending all the way back toward Rod Laver Arena. People stood shoulder to shoulder under the intense afternoon sun, hundreds simply hoping to witness the 20-year-old's Australian Open main draw debut in person. Court 6, that's where Tennis Australia scheduled her match. Court 6, a small and energetic outer court, holds roughly 1,000 spectators. Just 1,000. Yet even before the gates opened, several times that number had already lined up and the crowd kept growing. It stretched past food stalls, merchandise stands, and even beyond Rod Laver Arena. Tennis coach Dede Santa Maria, who saw the scene firsthand, didn't hold back in criticizing the organizers. "I know the courts, I know the layout. I knew it wouldn't be enough for the fans Alex would draw that day. Even 2 or 3 days earlier during practice, she was already being mobbed. The organizers should have recognized the signs. Court 6 only holds around 1,000 people. It's known as a party court. They should have scheduled her on a bigger stage." 2 days before the match, during practice sessions, Eala had already been surrounded by fans. The warning signs were obvious. The signals were clear. But Tennis Australia failed to act. By the overwhelming demand of fans who waited endlessly for even a glimpse of her on that far too small stage, Alexandra Eala was unofficially but undeniably crowned the most popular player in tennis at that moment. Ranked just 49th in the world and playing her first ever Australian Open main draw match, she had already become something far bigger than her ranking. That crown became undeniably hers. Journalist Quentin Moy posted from outside the venue, describing the unbelievable queue to get into Court 6. The reason Philippine star Alexandra Eala was about to play her first round match at the Australian Open. Within minutes, that post spread across social media, fueling even more urgency among those still navigating Melbourne's streets. Unable to get inside, thousands gathered in packed outdoor viewing zones, watching on giant screens, refusing to leave, refusing to miss a single moment. They had come too far to turn back, but what happened inside the court told a completely different story. Step into Court 6 on January 19th, 2026, and forget everything you know about tennis atmospheres. Forget Wimbledon's respectful silence. Forget the refined applause of US Open night sessions. This was something entirely different. Philippine flags filled every section. Every Eala point triggered explosive celebrations. "Let's go, Alex!" chants echoed in relentless waves. Even routine points sparked thunderous roars that drowned out the rest of the park. From the stands to the courtside bar, not a single space was empty. When Eala walked out, the reaction wasn't applause, it was an emotional eruption. Decades of hope, years of waiting, and generations of a sporting nation watching from afar, all released at once in a powerful, shaking roar. Eala felt it, you could see it in her movement. She played with intensity and focus. Her return game was precise, her ground strokes commanding. She won 60.6% of first serve returns, while Alicia Parks struggled at just 27.8%, setting the tone for what looked like a dominant victory. The first set lasted less than 30 minutes, 6-0 to Eala. A bagel, a statement, a declaration, the crowd exploded. The atmosphere felt more like a football stadium than a tennis court. Fans cheered Parks' mistakes and roared at her double faults. The umpire repeatedly asked for silence, but each request was quickly drowned out by fresh waves of noise. Alicia Parks, ranked 99th in the world, found herself in an environment unlike anything she had experienced in her professional career. She later admitted, "It was very difficult. I expected it, but I didn't. I was too focused on the crowd in the first set, which is why it went the way it did." During changeovers, she appeared close to tears. But Parks is a competitor, and competitors adjust. She later said, "I don't know my record when the crowd is against me, but it definitely lights a fire in me. I'd say I perform well when the crowd is against me." And she proved it. The second set arrived, and Parks shifted momentum completely. Eala, carrying the emotional weight of 60,000 expectations, began to tighten. Her usually fluid ground strokes became hesitant. Breakpoint chances appeared, then slipped away. Over the entire match, Eala converted only 4 of 17 breakpoints, a statistic that defined the turning point of the match. Parks took the second set 6-3, then closed the third 6-2. The final score read 0-6, 6-3, 6-2. Heartbreak. Eala was quickly escorted off the court by multiple security personnel, moving through a stunned and silent crowd. She paused, turned back, and acknowledged the fans who had traveled across the world to support her. But before the emotions could settle, the internet erupted. Within hours, controversy took over, sharp, divided, and impossible to ignore. The same crowd once praised as the most passionate in tennis was now being analyzed and criticized everywhere. One user wrote, "It's too much cheering during points, and distracting the opponent shouldn't be allowed." Another added, "Filipino fans showed incredible support, but tennis etiquette matters. Cheering opponent errors or making noise mid-point is unacceptable." Others labeled it disrespectful and inappropriate, but strong voices pushed back just as fiercely. "That's how we celebrate and support our own on the global stage. Why should we follow other countries' standards?" one response read. A tennis analyst even claimed the crowd may have cost Eala the match, saying she would beat Parks 10 times out of 10 without that pressure. Another warned that constant expectations could hinder her growth, comparing the situation to Emma Raducanu's experience. Filipino coach Dede Santamaria offered a balanced perspective. He acknowledged the passion but emphasized that Filipino tennis fans are still learning the sport's etiquette. Tennis isn't like basketball or boxing, you can't cheer anytime. There's a rhythm to when you show support and when you stay silent, he explained. He clarified that the issue wasn't hostility, but overwhelming enthusiasm, while also stressing that organizers should have anticipated the massive turnout. Then came a voice that shifted the conversation: Novak Djokovic. The 4-time Grand Slam champion addressed the situation directly, saying, "Having a huge crowd at a tennis tournament is a good problem to have. I saw what happened with Alex Eala, it's understandable. Players from countries like hers bring something special. It's a very good problem." Tennis Australia, facing criticism for the scheduling decision, responded to a complaint online, admitting the mistake and promising to improve next year. 6 simple words: "We'll learn for next year," confirmed what fans already knew. This wasn't a one-time moment. It was something permanent. But the crowd controversy wasn't even the most concerning story of the week. Before the match, before the headlines, there was a moment away from cameras that revealed how unprepared the system truly was for Eala's rise. During a practice session at the National Tennis Centre in Australia, Eala trained on an outdoor court without security. What started as a routine session quickly became overwhelming. Fans gathered, then more arrived, then even more. The crowd pressed in closer and closer. She later described being pushed back toward a wall as people continued moving forward, unaware of the situation. "There was a wall behind me and people kept pushing forward. I was getting closer and closer to it, and I thought, this is dangerous," she recalled. This wasn't a concert crowd, it was a professional athlete preparing for a major match, physically trapped by the sheer number of people surrounding her. With her father and coach nearby, Eala had to raise her voice to regain control. "I shouted, 'Give me space or I'm going to get run over.' And then they stopped, and I managed to get through." Those words carried weight. The incident exposed more than just a lack of security. It revealed a gap between Eala's cultural impact and the infrastructure meant to handle it. Her ranking had already climbed to world number 29 early in 2026, while her popularity soared far beyond what rankings alone could explain. Her press conferences drew more attention than top players like Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, with one pre-tournament video reaching hundreds of thousands of views, more than the men's world number 1 and 2 combined. Eala later admitted, "I'm still young and learning how to handle all this attention, while also being grateful. It's a process. Some moments this week were overwhelming, especially during practice. I didn't expect so many people." That statement carried real meaning. Despite everything, the global attention, the viral moments, the national support, she remained, at her core, a 20-year-old still adjusting to her own scale of influence. And that's what made this moment in Melbourne so significant. Tennis has always been global, but for decades its emotional centers stayed in familiar places: Europe, America, Australia. Alexandra Eala didn't just break into that space, she redefined it. Those 60,000 fans didn't come for a first-round match, they came to make a statement. A declaration that Philippine tennis had arrived not as a side story, not as a temporary highlight, but as a lasting and powerful force shaping the future of the sport. The scheduling mistake, the crowd debate, the safety concerns, the viral attention, none of it took away from what truly happened. If anything, it proved that the tennis world wasn't ready for what Eala represents. That's not her problem, that's the sport's responsibility to fix. Her role is simple: keep winning. And if the past year is any indication, the world hasn't seen anything yet. So here's the question. Was Melbourne 2026 the moment Filipino tennis permanently changed the game? Or is the real revolution still ahead?